Welcome back to Horror Galaxy. Tonight I have 5 chilling stories from Cumberland for you. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, because once you step onto the Horror Galaxy, you don't walk alone. My van rocked as the tires hit the old stone lip, and I swore under my breath because I'd taken that bend too tight again. I was already running late, already annoyed, already doing that thing where you talk to yourself like it helps. Come on, I muttered, tapping the steering wheel like it could push time forward. The bridge sat ahead like a choke point. One lane, thick stone sides, and a shallow dip that always made my suspension groan. It wasn't on any official route I liked, but for Maryport night drops it shaved off just enough minutes that I kept using it. No tolls, no gates, no signs. Just an old bridge with a nasty dip and a habit of making you slow down whether you wanted to or not. That night, I slowed because there was a man standing in the middle of it. At first, I thought he was drunk, or suicidal, or maybe one of those idiots who thought stepping in front of a vehicle was funny. My first instinct wasn't fear, it was anger. I hit the horn once, hard. He didn't flinch, didn't even look startled. He just lifted one hand, palm down, like he was telling me to settle. I leaned forward, squinting. My headlights caught him fully, and something about him made my stomach tighten. He wasn't dressed for the road. He had a dark coat that hung stiff, like it had dried that way. A flat cap pulled low. Boots planted dead center on the stones. And he held a small wooden box at waist level, like a waiter carrying a tray. I rolled down my window a crack, enough to shout without letting the cold slap me too hard. "Mate, what are you doing?" I called. "Get off the bridge before you get yourself killed." He took one step closer to my van, not rushing, not panicked. Measured, like this was routine. "Toll," he said. I actually laughed. It came out sharp and disbelieving. "There's no toll," I said. "It's a public road." His eyes were dark and steady, and he didn't blink much. "Toll," he repeated, and tilted the box slightly so I could see inside. Coins. Not many, just enough scattered to make a soft metallic glint. I stared at the box, then back at him. "You're having a laugh." He shook his head once, slow. "Want to cross?" I felt this heat rise in my face. The kind that comes from being inconvenienced by something ridiculous when you're already stretched thin. I glanced behind him. The bridge was empty. No other cars, no one filming. Just him and my delivery van and the stupid old stones under my wheels. I should have reversed. I should have told him to do one and called the police. That's what you tell yourself after, isn't it? All the sensible options you could have taken. But the truth is, I wanted to get home. I wanted the shift done. I wanted to cross the bridge and never think about it again. So I dug into the cup holder. I had loose change there, bits I used for vending machines at the depot. I found a coin and held it up between my fingers. "This?" I asked. He nodded. I flicked it into the box. It landed with a soft clink that sounded too loud in the quiet. The man stepped aside immediately, like he'd been waiting for that exact sound. "No, thank you." No smirk. Nothing. I put my foot down and drove past him, keeping my eyes on him in the mirror. He didn't watch me leave. He just turned back toward the center of the bridge, like he was resetting himself. I told myself it was some local scam, some weirdo tradition. Something people did on night roads when they were bored. I finished my deliveries, the way you do, trying not to feed the memory attention. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about his voice. Not the words, the way he said it. Like the word, toll, was older than me, older than the road, like it had weight. When I got home, I emptied my pockets on the counter and laughed to myself again, trying to make it normal. Paid a toll, I said out loud, and the words sounded stupid in my kitchen. Then my phone buzzed. A text from dispatch. Extra run tonight. You can do it, yeah. Maryport again. Same route. I stared at the message until my eyes blurred, and for some reason, I typed back. Yeah? Like my thumbs belonged to someone else. I drove the next night with my shoulders tense the whole way, telling myself I was being dramatic. I kept replaying the moment, the man, the box, the coin. As I got close, my mouth went dry. I slowed before the bridge, scanning it. It was empty. Relief hit so fast it felt stupid. I let out a breath and actually smiled. See, I told myself. Nothing. I rolled onto the stone lip, and the van jerked, not from the dip, but like something grabbed the undercarriage. It wasn't a mechanical snag. It was a sudden resistance, like driving into thick mud. I hit the accelerator. The engine revved, but my speed barely changed. My stomach dropped. In the headlights, the man stepped into view as if he'd been waiting just outside the beam. Same coat, same cap, same box. He stood directly in front of me again, not startled, not rushed, calm. I slammed the brakes. The van stopped so sharply my chest hit the belt. I sat there breathing hard, hands shaking on the wheel. No, I said, and it wasn't even anger this time. It was pleading. I paid you. He stared at me for a long moment, then looked down into his box. He lifted something out between his fingers. A slip of paper. He held it up like evidence. It was a receipt, not a normal one, not printed with branding or VAT numbers, or any of that. It was narrow and pale, and looked like it had been torn from somewhere that didn't use modern paper. The ink on it looked pressed, not printed. He tapped it with one finger. Receipt, he said. I leaned closer, frowning. Then my heart stuttered like it missed a beat, because on that receipt, in careful block letters, was my name, full name, and below it a date. Not that night's date, tomorrow's. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. That's not real, I whispered. The man's eyes lifted to mine. One to cross, he said again, like he hadn't shown me anything. My hands went numb. I had this sensation like my body wanted to leave without me. I'd seen my name printed on things before. Letters, payslips, driving license. But this was different. This felt like I'd been written down somewhere I wasn't meant to be. I swallowed and forced my voice to work. What is that date? I asked. He didn't answer. What happens tomorrow? I pushed. He tilted his head slightly, like he didn't understand the question, or like the answer was obvious. Toll, he said. I stared at him, then at the bridge ahead. My mind raced through awful possibilities. Accident. Breakdown. Someone hitting me. I thought about the times I'd sped down these lanes, tired, half distracted, trying to shave minutes. I pictured my van upside down in a ditch, my face against glass, a headline, a phone call to my mum. I couldn't breathe properly. I dug into the cup holder and pulled out every coin I had. My fingers were clumsy, shaking, spilling them. Take it, I said. Take all of it. Just let me through. His gaze followed the coins like he was counting without counting. Then he held the receipt out again, closer this time. I saw it clearly now. Next to my name was an amount. One. Just one. One coin. One life. My brain supplied, and I hated myself for thinking it. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Why is my name on that? He looked past me then, over my shoulder toward the road behind, like he was listening for something far away. The crossing counts, he said, quietly this time. I didn't understand, and he didn't explain. He simply tilted the box again. My hands hovered over the coins. Then, stupidly, I picked one. The single coin, the same way I did the night before. Like if I followed the rules exactly, it would somehow undo the receipt. I tossed it into his box. Clink. The sound hit me like a slap. The van loosened under me instantly, as if whatever invisible drag had been holding it let go. The man stepped aside, but before I could drive off, he added something, not loud, almost like an afterthought. Don't cross again. I froze. What? He didn't repeat it. He just turned slightly away, already done with me. I drove across the bridge so fast the suspension screamed. The moment I was on the other side, I pulled over hard, hazards on, breathing in short bursts like I'd run miles. I stared back at the bridge. He was still there. But now he was facing the other direction, toward the far end, like I didn't exist anymore. I didn't do my deliveries. I couldn't. I turned the van around on a narrow lay-bay, heart hammering, and drove straight back toward the depot, fighting the urge to look in the mirror too much. At the depot, I told dispatch I felt ill. They were annoyed, but they let me go. I drove home and sat on my sofa in my uniform until morning, staring at nothing, replaying that receipt again and again. Tomorrow, my name, 1. And that warning, don't cross again. When morning came, I didn't go in. I called in sick. I didn't tell them why. How could I? I spent the day in this weird half state, like I was waiting for something to fall on me. I didn't drive anywhere. I barely ate. Every noise outside made my heart lurch. Nothing happened. No crash. No phone call. No emergency. I made it through the whole day, and when midnight came, I sat upright in bed sweating, waiting for the moment the date on that receipt turned over. It did. And I was still alive. I stared at the ceiling and laughed once, quietly, because the relief was so sharp it almost hurt. It's nothing, I whispered. It was nothing. The next evening, dispatch called me directly. Look, my supervisor said, voice tight, we need you. We're short. Same run, same route. You in or not? I told him no. I said my car was acting up. I said I couldn't. I made excuses until he swore and hung up. I thought that was the end. 2 nights later, I got a message from a lad I worked with. His name was Darren. He took my runs sometimes. Mate, he texted. What's with that bridge you use? My blood went cold. I called him immediately. He answered on the second ring, sounding winded. You should have told me, he said. Told you what? I snapped, even though I knew. He laughed nervously. There's some bloke there, asking for a toll. On the bridge. My throat tightened. Did you pay him? There was a pause. Then, yeah. A coin. He had a box. Like some old act. Did he show you a receipt? I asked, voice shaking. Another pause. Longer. Yeah? Darren said. Quieter now. He did. And it had my name on it. I gripped the phone so hard it hurt. What date? He swallowed audibly. Tomorrow. My whole body felt like it tipped forward. Listen to me, I said, fast. Do not cross that bridge again. Do you hear me? Don't go near it. Don't let anyone talk you into it. What are you on about? He asked. But his voice was thin, scared. He told me the same thing. I whispered, Don't cross again. Darren went quiet, then said, I've got another run tomorrow night. Same area? Carlin's sick. I said, Quit. I don't care. Just don't go. He gave a weak laugh. I can't just. Darren, I said sharply, don't cross. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, all right, I won't. I hung up and sat there shaking, feeling like I'd just passed a curse to someone else. The next day, around lunchtime, I got another message. Not from Darren, from dispatch. Darren didn't show. Can you cover tonight? I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My fingers typed no before my brain finished thinking. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Darren to message. Waiting for proof he stayed home, that nothing happened. When morning finally came, I saw the missed calls. From Darren. 4 of them, all clustered close together in the night. I called back immediately. It rang and rang. No answer. I tried again. Voicemail. I drove to his place without thinking, even though I'd promised myself I wouldn't drive more than necessary. My hands were sweating on the wheel. My mind kept whispering that I was too late. His car was in the drive. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. I knocked, no answer. I knocked harder. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I stood there, breathing hard, and then I noticed something on the doormat. A narrow strip of pale paper. My stomach flipped. I picked it up with 2 fingers like it might bite. Receipt. It had Darren's name on it, and beneath it, the amount. 1. But the date had changed. It wasn't tomorrow anymore. It was yesterday. I stared at that date until my vision blurred. Then I heard it. A faint sound from inside the house. Not footsteps. Not a voice. A soft clink, like a coin dropping into wood. I backed away from the door so fast I nearly tripped, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't wait. I didn't knock again. I ran to my car and drove straight to the police station. And I sounded insane trying to explain it. I said my friend wasn't answering. I said I was worried. I didn't mention the bridge. I didn't mention the toll man. I couldn't. They did a welfare check later. They called me in the afternoon. They found Darren in his house, sitting upright in his armchair, like he'd fallen asleep mid-breath. No signs of struggle. No injury. Nothing stolen. Just gone. The officer sounded confused, like he didn't like what he was saying. It's like he just stopped. I hung up and sat in my car with my head against the steering wheel, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. That receipt on his doormat wasn't a warning. It was a record. And mine had been printed before I'd even understood what I was paying for. I never took that route again. I quit the night shifts within a week. Told everyone it was stress, and that wasn't even a lie. But sometimes, when I'm driving somewhere late and I have to cross a bridge, any bridge, I feel my foot ease off the accelerator without me deciding. I find myself scanning the road ahead for a man in a cap with a wooden box. And the worst part is this: I don't think he was ever trying to trick me. I think the toll was real. I think I paid to cross. And I think crossing is the thing that puts your name on the receipt in the first place. I yanked the book cart too fast, and the whole thing rattled like it was going to fall apart. So I grabbed the side with both hands and whispered, "Shut up," like the cart could hear me. Mrs. Henshaw looked up from the desk over her glasses. "Careful," she said. Not angry, just tired. "I am." I lied and pulled the cart the rest of the way into the back room. I was only helping after school because Mum said it was good experience, and because I liked being in the library where people spoke quietly and nothing ever happened. That was the reason I liked it. Nothing happened. No shouting. No weird looks. No teachers grabbing your arm too hard. Just books and the smell of dust and paper and those little date stamps that went thunk. I started sorting returns into piles like I'd been taught. Fiction. Non-fiction. Kids. Reference. My hands moved fast because I wanted to be done before the late bus. I was half focused, already thinking about the crisps in my bag, when I picked up a thin hardback that didn't feel right. It was older than the others. The cover was a faded green with no title on the front. Just a rectangle where something had probably peeled away. The spine had gold lettering that was worn off, except for one word. I could still make out PN right H. I frowned. We didn't really have books like that anymore. Most of them had plastic covers and barcodes and stickers. This one felt like it belonged in someone's attic. I flipped it open to the first page and froze, because it wasn't a normal book page. It was one of those thick black and white class photographs glued inside, the kind that looked like everyone had been forced to sit still for too long. A whole class of kids stared out at me from the page. Rows and rows. Short ones in the front, taller ones at the back. Everyone wearing similar uniforms. Everyone looking serious. Except the photo was wrong. Not wrong like old. Wrong like it shouldn't be here. The paper around it had ripples, like it had been damp at some point. The edges of the photo looked stuck down with glue that had gone brown. And right in the back row, all the way on the left, there was one kid whose face looked blurred, like the camera hadn't wanted to focus on them. I leaned closer, nose almost touching the page. The blurred kid was wet. I know how that sounds. But you could see it. Their hair clung in thin strings to their forehead. Their shirt was darker in patches, like they'd stepped out of a lake and then been forced to stand still for a photo. I sucked in a breath through my teeth and snapped the book shut like I'd been caught doing something I wasn't supposed to. Then I opened it again immediately, because curiosity always beat fear in my head. The class photo was still there, still wrong, still staring. I looked away from the wet kid and scanned the other faces. Most of them were ordinary, some smiling a little, some bored, some trying not to blink. I thought maybe it was an old school photo from a local school, maybe donated, maybe misfiled. But why would it be hidden inside a book with no title? I flipped to the next page, blank. The whole book was blank after that. No chapters, no writing. Just thick old paper, and that photo glued right at the start like a secret. I carried it out front and put it on the counter, trying to act casual, even though my heart was doing that faster thump thing it did when I thought I might be in trouble. "Mrs. Henshaw," I said. She looked up again. "Yes, love. This book doesn't have anything in it," I said, and opened it to show her the photo. "It's just this." She leaned forward. Her face changed so quickly it made my stomach drop. It wasn't shock exactly. It was recognition. Like she'd seen a spider on the wall and was pretending she hadn't. "That shouldn't be in circulation," she said quietly. She reached for it, then stopped with her fingers hovering like the page might bite her. "Where did you get it?" "Returns," I said. "The cart." "Miss Hare's." Henshaw swallowed. I saw her throat move. She closed the book with one firm motion and slid it toward herself like she needed it away from me. "Don't go looking through old donations," she said. I didn't. I started, but she cut me off with a look. "Just don't," she said. And her voice had that edge adults used when they didn't want questions. I stared at her. "What is it?" "It's not for you," she said, and then she softened a bit because maybe she saw my face. "It's just an old school archive thing. Someone put it in the wrong place. That's all." She picked up the book and walked toward the little office behind the desk. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there with my hands empty and my cheeks burning like I'd been scolded even though I hadn't done anything. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because once you see something like that, your brain doesn't let go. It keeps poking at it like a loose tooth. I tried to go back to shelving like normal. I even forced myself to whistle quietly, like if I acted normal, I'd feel normal. But my eyes kept flicking to the office door. I waited until Mrs. Henshaw came out again with a stack of paperwork and went to the far side of the room to help an old man with the printer. I told myself not to. I told myself, stop it, and then my feet moved anyway. The office door wasn't locked. I pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The room smelled like old carpet and stale tea. Mrs. Henshaw's desk was covered in folders. A tiny fan sat in the corner like it had been there forever. And on the desk, right where she'd left it, was the green book. I stepped closer. My heartbeat sounded loud in my ears. I opened the cover again, slower this time. The class photo stared up at me like it had been waiting. My eyes went straight to the back row, left side. The wet kid. Only now it wasn't blurred anymore. I blinked hard, convinced I'd imagined it. But no, there was a face. Clear, pale, lips pressed tight. Eyes wide open in a way that didn't look like a normal photo expression. Like they were holding their breath. I leaned in until my breath fogged the glossy surface. And that's when I noticed something else. There was another kid now. In the back row, right side, near the edge. Someone who wasn't there before. They were wet too. Same stringy hair. Same dark patches on the uniform. Same stare straight at the camera like they were angry the picture existed. My stomach flipped. I flipped the cover shut and opened it again fast, like catching the photo in a different state would prove something. They were still there. Two wet kids. My hands went cold. I backed away from the desk and whispered, "No," like it was a negotiation. I left the office as quietly as I could and shut the door behind me. My legs felt shaky under me like I'd run a mile. I went back to the shelving area and tried to focus on arranging books. My hands kept missing the shelves. I kept bumping the spines crooked. My brain wouldn't stop showing me the extra kid, appearing like a stain spreading. When the old man left and Mrs. Henshaw returned to the desk, I watched her. I watched her smile at someone like nothing was wrong. I watched her stamp a return slip. I watched her avoid the office door completely. I waited for my moment again, because fear and curiosity aren't opposites when you're a kid. They're the same fuel. 10 minutes later, when she walked toward the toilets down the hall, I went back in. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened the book and looked at the photo. There were 3 now. The original wet kid on the left, the new one on the right, and another, wedged between 2 taller students in the center back row, shoulders hunched slightly like they didn't fit. All of them wet, all of them staring. The rest of the class looked normal. Dry hair, normal uniforms, normal bored faces. But the wet ones looked wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Not ghostly, not blurry. Just like they didn't belong to the same moment as everyone else. Like they'd been added after the photo was taken. My eyes flicked down to the bottom corner, where old school photos sometimes had the year printed. The ink was faded, but it was there. Nenetaninetwaineni. The same year as the concept in my head, except I wasn't thinking concept. I was thinking, this is real. This was taken when I was alive. My throat tightened. I turned the page, hoping for any explanation. Blank, blank, blank. Then I heard the hallway door click. Mrs. Henshaw coming back. I snapped the book shut and shoved it back exactly where it had been. I stepped away, standing stiff like I hadn't moved. The office door opened. Mrs. Henshaw stopped the second she saw me. Her face did something awful. Not anger, not shock. Fear. She closed the door behind her very carefully, like she didn't want it to slam. "What are you doing in here?" she asked. I was looking," I said, and my voice cracked because I didn't know how to lie properly when my heart was racing. Her eyes flicked toward the desk, toward the book, then back to me. "Did you open it again?" she asked, quieter. "Yes," I admitted. She shut her eyes for a second, like she was trying to stop herself from saying something. When she opened them, she looked tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. "How many?" she asked. I stared at her. "What?" "How many are wet?" she repeated, and her voice went thin like it hurt to say it. My stomach sank straight through the floor. "3," I whispered. Mrs. Henshaw's shoulders sagged. She walked to the desk and sat down slowly like her legs didn't work right. She put her hand on the book without opening it. "It started again," she said, to herself more than me. I felt tears sting my eyes, not because I was sad, but because my body didn't know what else to do. "What is it?" I asked. "Why are they in there?" "Mrs." Henshaw looked at me carefully, like she was deciding whether I was old enough for the truth. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. The label on it was handwritten. Penrate Sikodawai, INCDD. She opened it and slid out a newspaper clipping. The headline was smudged but readable. Tishar e students mes sin FTR philoden LDQR birigi. My mouth went dry. "Old Quarry Bridge," I whispered. I knew it. Everyone did. It wasn't famous, but people talked about it. A place parents told you not to go. Mrs. Henshaw nodded once. "They weren't supposed to be there," she said. "They went after school. Said they wanted to see the water when it was high. People searched. They found shoes, a bag, nothing else." I stared at the clipping, then back at the book. "The photo is from that year," I said. "Yes," she said. That class photo. It was taken the week before they went missing. My heart was pounding so hard my chest hurt. So why are they wet now? Mrs. Henshaw's eyes filled slightly, but she didn't cry. Because someone put that book together after, she said. A teacher. Trying to preserve things. Trying to make sense of it. Someone glued the photo in there, like if you could hold them on paper, you could stop the reality of them being gone. She rubbed her forehead with her fingers. It didn't stop anything, she whispered. It just created a place for them to come back. I shook my head hard. That's not possible. I thought the same, she said. The first time I saw it change, I was your age. My breath caught. You saw it change. She nodded slowly. At first, there was one wet face, then another, then another. Her eyes locked onto mine, and then there was me. My whole body went cold. What do you mean? Mrs. Henshaw swallowed. My face appeared in the back row. Wet. Staring. And the next day, my friend Toby went missing. I couldn't speak. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. She leaned forward, voice urgent now. Listen to me. The photo isn't just showing who drowned. It's showing who's next. A sharp panic rose in my throat like choking. No, I said. No, no, no. Mrs. Henshaw opened the book. My eyes snapped down to the photo before I could stop myself. The wet kids were still there. 3. And in the back row, near the center, squeezed between two taller students, there was a 4th. My face. Not a blurry wrong version. A clear, sharp version of me with my school jumper and my stupid haircut and my mouth slightly open like I'd been caught mid-breath. And I was drenched. I made a sound I didn't even recognize, like a small animal. Mrs. Henshaw closed the book immediately. Don't look too long, she said, voice breaking. It wants you to accept it. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. My hands were shaking so hard my fingers tingled. That's not me, I whispered. It is, she said softly, and that was somehow worse. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve, angry at myself for crying. So what do? I asked. I don't go near the quarry bridge. I'll never go. I swear. Mrs. Henshaw nodded. That's the first part, she said. But it's not enough. It doesn't care about the bridge itself. It cares about the pattern. What pattern? I demanded. She opened the folder again and pulled out a list. Names. Dates. Little notes next to them. She slid it toward me. 3 missing in 1999. 1 missing in 2002. 2 missing in 2007. And every time, one thing repeated: each missing person had seen the photo. Each had looked long enough to find themselves. My stomach twisted. So once it shows you, it's already decided. Mrs. Henshaw shook her head. No, she said firm. It tries to decide. That's the difference. She stood abruptly and moved to a cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a metal cash box and set it on the desk, unlocking it with a key she wore on a chain. Inside were old photographs. Stacks of them. I stared. What are those? Copies, she said. I started making them years ago. 1 copy for every time it changes. As she pulled out one and showed it to me. The same class photo, but with something scratched out. One of the wet faces had been gouged with pen so hard the paper tore. That's cruel, I blurted. It's survival, she snapped back, and then softened. I'm sorry. I know how it sounds. She held the ruined photo up. The year Toby disappeared, I scratched out my own face. I destroyed it until it wasn't me anymore. The next day, I didn't disappear. My breath shook out of me. So you're saying I have to ruin it? Yes, she said, but not in the book. The book is the anchor. You don't touch the original more than you have to. Or she grabbed a blank sheet and a camera she kept for scanning documents. Fast, practiced. She opened the book just long enough to capture the photo, then closed it like slamming a lid on boiling water. The printer spat out the copy in slow mechanical chunks. I watched my drenched face appear on paper, pixel by pixel, and I felt like I was watching my own death print itself. Mrs. Henshaw shoved the copy toward me with a pen. "Do it," she said. My hand hovered. I felt sick. My brain screamed that this was insane, that I was destroying a photo of innocent kids, that it was disrespectful. But then I saw my own wet eyes in the picture, staring straight at me like accusation. I pressed the pen down on my face and dragged it hard. The ink tore through the paper. I scratched until my face was a black hole. I kept going until the page ripped and my hand cramped, and my breath came out in sobbing bursts I couldn't control. When I finally stopped, my chest heaved like I'd been underwater. Mrs. Henshaw took the ruined copy, folded it carefully, and dropped it into the metal cash box like it was a dead thing. Then she exhaled slowly. "Now," she said, "we lock the book away. And you don't speak about it to anyone. Not your mum. Not your friends. Not the wrong kind of curious people." I wiped my cheeks, angry and embarrassed. "What if it changes again?" I asked. She looked at me, and her eyes were steady now. "If it changes again," she said, "I'll know. It always happens when someone finds it." She took the green book and slid it into the cabinet, then locked it with both hands like she was sealing something alive inside. I left the library that day numb, walking to the bus stop like my body belonged to someone else. Nothing happened the next day, or the next week, or the next month. I didn't disappear. I didn't drown. I didn't get pulled into some quarry water like a story people whispered. But I never forgot the feeling of seeing myself in that photo, wet and staring. Years later, when I was older, I asked Mrs. Henshaw if she ever destroyed the book completely, burned it, buried it, thrown it in the quarry itself. She shook her head. "I tried," she said. "It always comes back. It always returns to the library." "And the kids?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. "They're still there," she said, "because that's what the book does. It preserves the part of them that never came home." I asked her one last thing. The question I'd carried for years. Why was I in it at all? I whispered. "I never went near the quarry." Henshaw looked at me for a long time, then said, "Because you opened the book. You gave it permission to know you." I still have nightmares, sometimes where I'm flipping through a blank book, and I can't stop. My hands won't listen, and the photo keeps updating faster than I can blink. More wet faces, more staring eyes. But the nightmare always ends the same way. My face appears again, and behind my ruined face on the paper copy, I can still see the outline of my eyes, trying to look through the ink, like something on the other side still remembers exactly who I am. And that's why, even now, I don't look too long at old photographs. I don't linger on group pictures. I don't stare into the back row. because part of me is still scared that if I look long enough, I'll see someone new standing there behind everyone else. Wet, staring, and waiting for me to notice. I was halfway through pulling my gloves on when Mr. Granger grabbed my elbow hard enough to make me flinch. "Don't touch anything yet," he said, like I'd already done something wrong. "I'm just getting ready," I told him, trying to keep my voice calm. My fingers felt stiff from the cold and from the way my nerves were already buzzing. He let go but didn't step back. He stood too close, eyes darting past me toward the yard like he expected something to move. "They don't make a sound," he said. "That's the worst part." I looked at Dr. Willis, hoping she'd take over. But she was already walking toward the first pen, with her kit bag swinging at her side. Focused in that way, she got when a call sounded urgent. "Show me the last one," she said. Mr. Granger nodded and started leading us across the yard. I followed 2 steps behind, clutching the clipboard and trying not to show how badly I wanted to turn around and get back in the car. The place felt wrong the second we arrived. Not haunted, not spooky in a childish way. Wrong like something had happened recently, and the ground hadn't finished holding the memory yet. We passed the farmhouse and headed toward the lower barn. The gate into the animal yard was shut, an old metal one with a thick chain looped around it. Mr. Granger pulled a ring of keys from his pocket. Then he stopped. I watched him stare at the chain like he didn't recognize it. "That's not mine," he muttered. Dr. Willis didn't even blink. "Open it." He gave a tight nod, stepped closer, and lifted the chain. It wasn't padlocked. It was wrapped, twisted through itself, like someone had intentionally made it hard to undo. But the strange part wasn't that. The strange part was the end of the chain. It wasn't hooked on the outside of the gate, like you'd expect. It was threaded through the bars and fastened to a metal loop on the inside. I leaned closer and felt my stomach tighten. "How did you?" I started, then stopped because I didn't want to sound stupid. Mr. Granger looked back at me, eyes wide and irritated. "That's what I'm telling you," he said. "It's been doing that." "Doing that how?" I asked. He shook his head sharply, like the question was pointless. "I lock it from the outside. I come back and it's locked from the inside." Da-da. Willis stepped forward and tugged at the chain. "It's not a lock," she said. "It's a barrier, or Mr. Granger swallowed and finally managed to undo it. His hands were shaking. He didn't look like the kind of man who shook. He looked like the kind who fixed anything with brute force and stubbornness. Seeing him fumble with the metal made my throat go dry. When the gate finally opened, it creaked like it hadn't been moved in weeks, even though there were fresh tire tracks across the mud. I followed Dr. Willis in, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet. Not country quiet. Empty quiet. No birds. No distant bleating. No restless shifting. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. Mr. Granger led us behind the barn where the ground dipped slightly. I saw the sheep before I saw the blood. 2 of them lay side by side, stiff and wrong, like someone had placed them there. Their eyes were open and glassy. Their mouths were slightly parted. No torn flesh. No obvious bite marks. No struggle marks in the soil around them. Dr. Willis crouched, careful, professional, How long? She asked. Found them at first light, Mr. Granger said. There were 3 yesterday. 2 today. Any noise last night? Dr. Willis asked. Mr. Granger's laugh came out short and ugly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Nothing. Not even the dogs. I glanced toward the farmhouse. You have dogs. He nodded. 2. They wouldn't go out. Not even for meat. Dr. Willis pressed fingers to the sheep's neck, then leaned closer to inspect the face, the nostrils, the gums. She moved with confidence, but I saw the shift in her eyes when she noticed what I noticed. There was foam around the sheep's mouth. Not a lot. Just enough to look like it had been breathing hard right before it died. Dr. Willis stood up slowly. This isn't a predator, she said. Mr. Granger's face twisted. Then what is it? Dr. Willis looked toward the barn doors. Show me inside, she said. We walked around to the main barn entrance. The doors were open already, both of them pushed wide like someone wanted them to stay that way. The smell hit me first. Stale hay, old manure, and something sharper underneath, like wet stone. Mr. Granger didn't go in right away. He stood at the threshold like he was waiting for permission. Dr. Willis stepped in without hesitation. I followed, and my shoes stuck slightly to the floor. That's when I saw the drag marks. They started near the center aisle, 2 long lines through the dust and straw, like something heavy had been pulled across the concrete. I pictured a sheep being dragged by its legs, but the marks were too even, too smooth. No jerking, no stutter, just a straight pull. Dr. Willis crouched and ran her glove along the grooves. These are fresh, she said. Mr. Granger's voice dropped. That's where they go. I followed the lines with my eyes. They led straight into the far wall, not toward it, into it. The marks didn't stop at the wall like they should have. They faded right where the concrete met the stone, as if the dragged thing had continued through. I felt my throat tighten, and I swallowed hard, trying to force my brain to be logical. Maybe there's a door, I said, even though I couldn't see one. There isn't. Mr. Granger said immediately. I built that wall. I bloody built it. Dr. Willis stood slowly and scanned the barn interior. There were stalls along the sides, mostly empty now. A few goats stared at us from one pen, pressed back far from the gate like they didn't want to be close. Their eyes were wide and too bright. One of them kept opening and closing its mouth in tiny silent motions, like it was trying to bleat but couldn't. I rubbed my arms through my jacket, trying to fight the cold creeping over my skin. Why aren't they making any noise? I asked. Dr. Willis didn't answer immediately. She moved toward the goat pen, unlatched it, and stepped inside. The goats flinched away from her, hooves clacking on the concrete. She crouched near the closest one. Hold her, she said. I stepped in, heart beating too fast, and wrapped my arms around the goat's body, the way I'd been trained. It felt tense and trembling under my grip, but there was no sound, not even a grunt. I could feel it breathing fast, ribs flickering. Dr. Willis gently opened the goat's mouth. I expected to see sores or swelling, something that would explain the silence. Instead, her fingers froze. What? I asked. Dr. Willis angled the goat's head toward me. Look, she said. I leaned in. The goat's tongue had little cuts along the sides, shallow and clean like they'd been made by something sharp and careful. Not bitten. not torn. Sliced. My stomach turned. How does that happen? I whispered. Mr. Granger's voice came from behind us, strained. That's what it does, he said. Doctor. Willis released the goat carefully and stepped out of the pen. She wiped her glove on a cloth like she couldn't stand the feel of the animal's saliva. This isn't disease, she said. This is intentional. Mr. Granger's face went pale. You mean someone came in here? Doctor. Willis turned slowly, eyes scanning the barn again. Not someone, she said. The words made my skin prickle. I wanted her to say fox. I wanted her to say feral dog. I wanted her to say anything that lived in the world I understood. She walked toward the far wall, where the drag marks disappeared. Mr. Granger stayed back. I followed because I didn't want to be alone anywhere in that barn, even if following meant getting closer to the wall. Up close, the stones looked ordinary. Rough, grey, cold. There were old metal bolts hammered in at uneven points, probably for hanging tools. There was no doorway, no hatch, no seam. But the smell was stronger here. Wet stone, like rain trapped underground. Dr. Willis pressed her gloved palm against the wall. Then she pulled her hand back sharply. What? I asked, voice high. She stared at her glove. There was a damp patch on it, as if the stone had sweated. She murmured. Mr. Granger swallowed loudly behind us. It's like that at night, he said. The wall goes damp, and then I hear something on the other side. I turned. You hear something? He nodded once, fast, like admitting it hurt his pride, scraping, like hooves on stone. My mouth went dry. But there's nothing back there. There's the hill, he said. Solid rock. Dr. Willis crouched, studying the floor at the base of the wall. I looked too, and my stomach tightened again. There were small grooves in the concrete where the drag marks ended. Like whatever was pulled had been tugged down, not forward. As if it had been pulled under the wall. I backed up a step without thinking. My heel bumped something. I looked down. A piece of wood, half buried in straw, with metal nails bent outward, a broken board, like part of a gate. I picked it up slowly, and the weight of it felt wrong in my hands, like it had been ripped from somewhere with force. Where's this from? I asked. Mr. Granger stared at it like he recognized it, but didn't want to. That's from the inside gate, he said. What inside gate? Dr. Willis asked, snapping her attention from the wall. Mr. Granger pointed toward the far corner, where a small corridor led to a separate pen area. There, he said. The inner gate that keeps the animals from the back stalls. We walked over. My steps felt clumsy. My heart was hammering so loud I couldn't tell if the barn was still silent or if my own blood was drowning everything out. The corridor was narrow. The air was colder there, and it smelled stronger, like wet rock and old hay mashed together. At the end was the inner gate, or what was left of it. The hinges were still attached to the concrete frame, but the gate itself hung crooked, snapped in half like something had twisted it until it gave. And the chain was there, wrapped around the bars, fastened to the inside. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. That's exactly like the outer gate, I whispered. Mr. Granger's voice shook. It's been locking me out of my own barns. Doctor. Willis stepped closer and tugged gently at the chain. It didn't move. Not because it was tight. because it was threaded in a way that didn't make sense. Loop through loop through loop, like hands had done it with time and patience. I felt a flush of panic. "Someone's doing this," I said. "Someone's messing with you." And Mr. Granger shook his head. "Then where are the footprints?" he snapped. "Where's the break-in? Where's the noise? Where's anything that makes sense?" Duprat. Willis straightened and made a decision. I saw it in her posture. "We're leaving," she said. Mr. Granger blinked. "Leaving? You can't leave. My animals are dying." Dr. Willis's voice was firm now, not unkind but unmovable. "This isn't a vet issue anymore," she said. "This is a police issue." And Mr. Granger laughed, sharp and bitter. "What do I tell them? That my wall is eating sheep?" I felt my throat tighten, because that was exactly what it looked like. Dr. Willis turned toward the barn entrance and motioned for me. "Go to the car," she said quietly, like she didn't want her words echoing in here. Now, I nodded too fast and started walking, forcing my legs to keep moving even though every part of me wanted to sprint. Halfway down the main aisle, one of the goats shifted in its pen, and its hooves scraped the concrete. The sound was soft, barely anything. But it was the first real sound in the barn, and it made every hair on my arms stand up, because the goat didn't make it. It was just the scrape. No bleat, no breath, nothing. "Doctor." Willis stopped behind me. "Did you hear that?" she asked, voice tight. I nodded, swallowing hard. Then we heard something else. A slow, dragging scrape from the far wall. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady sound, like something heavy being pulled across stone. I turned my head slightly, not wanting to look, but unable to stop myself. The drag marks on the floor were changing. Fresh grooves appeared in the dust, as if something invisible was being pulled right now, making a new path toward the wall. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "No, no." Mr. Granger made a choking sound behind us. "Not again," he said. "Doctor." Willis grabbed my shoulder and pulled me forward. "Move," she hissed. I moved. My shoe stuck, then freed. Then stuck again as I ran down the aisle. The scrape continued behind us, steady, unhurried, like whatever was doing it didn't care if we watched. We burst out of the barn into the yard, and the sudden open space made me feel dizzy. I sucked in air like I'd been holding my breath for minutes. "Doctor." Willis didn't stop. She marched straight to the outer gate and froze. The metal gate was shut again. The chain was wrapped, fastened to the inside. I stared, my brain refusing to accept it. We hadn't even been outside long enough for someone to do that. We'd been in the barn. There was nowhere else anyone could have come from. Mr. Granger slammed into the gate and shook it, face contorted. "Stop it!" he roared, like he was yelling at the farm itself. Dr. Willis grabbed the chain and yanked, hard enough to hurt her hands. It didn't give. Then I noticed something small, almost nothing, and my blood turned to ice. The chain was wet. Not rain wet. Like it had been pulled through water. Like it had come from somewhere damp and underground. "Decker Willis," I whispered, barely able to speak. "It's wet." She looked at me, and for the first time since we arrived, she looked genuinely frightened. "Get back," she said. Mr. Granger didn't. He kept shaking the gate, shouting, face red with rage and panic. "Please," he yelled. "Just stop." The scrape came again, louder now, from inside the barn. Then a new sound joined it. A soft clink, metal against metal, like a chain being pulled tight from the other side. Mr. Granger stopped moving. His face drained of color. He stared at the chain like he understood something too late. "No," he whispered. The chain twitched in Dr. Willis's hands, not from the wind, from tension. It pulled inward toward the yard, tightening in a slow, deliberate draw, like something unseen was taking hold of it. And Mr. Granger, still gripping the gate bars, jerked forward half an inch like the gate had tugged him. He gasped, fingers whitening. Dr. Willis grabbed my arm and yanked me back hard. "Don't touch him," she hissed. I tried to pull away, instinct screaming to help, but her grip was iron. Mr. Granger's boots slid in the mud. He dug his heels in and made a sound I'll never forget. Half grunt, half terrified sob. Then his hands slipped, not off the bars, through them, like his fingers had gone numb, like they didn't work. His body lurched forward, and his chest pressed against the gate, and for one horrifying second, he looked like he was being hugged by it. Then the gate pulled him, not violently, not with a jerk, just steadily, like gravity. His mouth opened, but no scream came out. His eyes bulged, veins standing out on his neck as he tried to force sound through his throat. Perfect silence. He clawed at the bars and his nails scraped metal, but even that sound felt muffled. "Doctor." Willis covered my mouth with her hand before I could scream for him. Mr. Granger's boots dragged through the mud toward the hinge side of the gate, toward the chain, toward the inside fastening point that made no sense. And then he was gone. Not around the corner. Not behind the gate. Gone like someone erased him from the yard, leaving only the churned mud and one shallow groove where his boot had slid. The chain hung slack again. "Doctor." Willis slowly lowered her hand from my mouth. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt locked. I stared at the empty space where Mr. Granger had been and whispered. Where did he go? Dr. Willis didn't answer me. She stepped forward with shaking hands and unwrapped the chain. Fast, desperate, not caring about logic anymore. This time it came loose easily, like it wanted to be opened now. The gate swung outward with a creak. "Doctor." Willis grabbed my wrist and pulled me through it. "Run to the car," she said. I ran. I stumbled once, caught myself, and kept running. My face was wet with tears I hadn't noticed falling. Dr. Willis slammed into the driver's side, fumbled her keys, and got the engine going. I threw myself into the passenger seat, shaking so hard I couldn't buckle my belt. As she reversed, I looked back. The barn doors were still open, and in the dark rectangle of the entrance, I saw movement. Not a figure, not a shadow, just the suggestion of something shifting behind the wall side corridor. Then the barn doors began to close, slowly, on their own. "Doctor." Willis hit the accelerator, and we tore down the lane so fast the tires spit gravel. Neither of us spoke for a long time. When we finally reached the main road, Dr. Willis pulled over and sat with both hands gripping the wheel like she needed it to stay real. Her voice came out hoarse. "We call the police," she said. "We tell them he's missing." "What about the animals?" I whispered. "Doctor." Willis stared straight ahead. "They're already gone," she said softly. "They just haven't finished disappearing yet." The police did go out. They searched the farm. They found the dead sheep. They found the broken inner gate. They found the drag marks on the barn floor. But they didn't find footprints. They didn't find blood. They didn't find Mr. Granger. They said he'd likely run. They said maybe he'd had a breakdown. They said maybe he'd fallen somewhere on his land. They didn't say the thing I knew in my bones. Something on that farm was taking living things without sound, without struggle, without leaving proof. Doctor. Willis filed reports and stopped taking calls from that area. The practice stopped sending anyone out there. Officially, it was unsafe conditions. Unofficially, everyone just avoided it. And me, I quit within the month. Not because of animals dying. I'd seen animals die before. It was sad, but it was part of the job. I quit because I watched a man vanish in perfect silence while a chain tightened itself from the inside. I still drive past that turning sometimes when I visit family up north. The lane is overgrown now. The gate is rusted. The farmhouse looks empty from the road. But even from a distance, you can see the barn if you look. And I always do, even though I hate myself for it. The doors are shut. The yard is still, and the metal gate at the front, it's always chained, from the inside. The phone started ringing before I could finish counting the till, sharp and sudden, and my stomach dropped because I already knew which light was flashing. Room 12. Again, I stared at the clock above the key rack and whispered, "You've got to be joking." Even though it was exactly when it always happened. Every night, same minute. Not around then, not close, exact. I'd tested it without meaning to, holding my breath, watching the second hand crawl, waiting for the ring that felt less like sound and more like pressure behind my eyes. I picked up the receiver because that was my job. "Motel front desk," I said, keeping my voice neutral. For half a second there was nothing. Then the recording started. "Please," a voice said, distorted and flat like it had been copied too many times. "Please help me. I'm stuck. I can't get out. It's dark." I closed my eyes. The voice wasn't panicked. That was the worst part. It sounded tired, like it had been asking for help for a long time and no longer expected it to come. "Room 12, I said, automatically. "Are you in the room right now?" The recording didn't respond to me. It never did. It just kept going, looping through the same phrases, the same breaths, the same faint scrape underneath the words, like something shifting against a surface too close to the microphone. "I'm going to send someone," I said, even though I was the only one on shift. Even though I already knew what I'd find. The recording ended. The line went dead. I hung up slowly and looked down the hallway. The carpet runner lay flat and undisturbed. The exit sign hummed softly. No doors opened. No footsteps. Nothing moved. Room 12 was empty. It had been empty all week. I grabbed the key and walked down anyway, because doing nothing felt worse. My shoes made small, traitorous sounds on the carpet. I knocked once, then again, and unlocked the door. The room smelled stale, like a space no one had slept in, but hadn't fully forgotten people. The bed was untouched. The phone sat on the nightstand, receiver cradled properly, cord uncoiled. I picked it up and pressed it to my ear. Silence. I checked the bathroom, the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing. No one. Just a room that didn't know why it was being accused. When I got back to the desk, my hands were shaking. I poured myself water from the staff jug and spilled some on the counter because my grip slipped. I wiped it up fast, annoyed at myself for reacting like this was new. It wasn't. The first night, I'd laughed it off. Old wiring, crossed lines, some idiot prank with a recording. The second night, I'd logged it. The third, I'd unplugged the phone in room 12 entirely. It rang anyway, not the desk phone, the room phone. The light blinked like it always did, cheerful and wrong. I called the owner the next morning. He sighed like I'd complained about towels. Old building, he said. Probably picking up something weird. Don't worry about it. I worried about it anyway. By the fifth night, I started listening more closely to the recording. Not the words, the space between them, the echo that didn't match a motel room. It sounded tight, close, like the voice was pressed into something narrow. That night, after the call ended, I leaned over the desk and put my ear against the wall behind it. I don't know why. I just did. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. Not from the hallway. Not from a room. From inside the wall itself, shallow and uneven, like someone trying not to make noise. I jumped back so fast I knocked the chair over. My heart hammered, and I stood there staring at the wallpaper, half expecting it to pulse. The breathing stopped. I didn't sleep the next day. I lay in bed replaying the sound, telling myself I was overtired, that stress did strange things. When my alarm went off, I almost called in sick. I didn't. I needed to know. That night, the phone rang on schedule. I answered, hands slick with sweat. "Please," the voice said again. "I'm still here." My throat tightened. "Where?" I asked, even though I knew it wouldn't respond. "I can hear you," the recording said, and my blood went cold because that was new. "I can hear you walking." I slammed the receiver down and staggered back, breath coming too fast. The clock above the desk ticked on, uncaring. The hallway stayed empty. I grabbed the maintenance keys from the drawer. My fingers fumbled until I found the one I needed. The small square hatch behind the desk had always been there, painted over so many times it blended into the wall. I told myself I'd just look. Just confirm there was nothing there. I pried it open. Inside was darkness and a narrow crawl space lined with pipes and wires. Dust floated in the beam of my torch. I aimed it left, then right, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. That's when I saw the phone line. It ran parallel to the others, but wasn't connected to any junction. It disappeared into the darkness between studs, vanishing deeper into the building. I followed it on hands and knees, the air growing tighter, warmer. The ringing started behind me, not loud, muffled, like a phone wrapped in fabric. I crawled faster, panic burning through my chest. The line led to a space barely wide enough to turn around. Wedged between beams was an old phone, yellowed and cracked, receiver hanging loose. It was ringing. I stared at it, frozen. The sound vibrated through the wood beneath my palms. I reached out and lifted the receiver because some part of me needed to know. "Please," the voice said, clearer now. "You found me." "I can't see you," I whispered. "You're looking at me?" it said. My torch flickered. In its weak light, I saw scratches on the wood around the phone, deep, desperate marks. Beneath them, faint impressions, like fingerprints pressed again and again into softening material. "What happened to you?" I asked, tears blurring my vision. The voice paused. When it spoke again, it sounded closer, layered over itself. "They didn't hear me," it said, "so I learned to use the lines." Understanding hit me in a sick rush. I pictured the missing guest reports I'd skimmed and forgotten. The names, the dates, people who checked in alone and were never seen leaving. The walls remembered them. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered softly. The ringing stopped. The breathing began, all around me now, inside the crawl space, inside the walls. I crawled backward in blind panic, scraping my elbows, gasping for air. When I burst back into the office, I slammed the hatch shut and locked it, though I knew locks didn't matter much here. I quit the next morning. I didn't give notice. I didn't explain. I handed the keys over and walked away. They shut the motel down a year later. Officially, it was structural issues. Unofficially, people said guests complained about phones ringing in empty rooms. I don't answer unknown numbers anymore. I don't stay in motels. And sometimes, late at night, when my own phone rings at a familiar minute, I let it ring until it stops. Because I know now that some calls aren't meant to be answered. And some voices don't want help. They want out. I dropped the box of candles onto the table too hard, and the whole stack inside clacked together, and Mrs. Lorne snapped her head around like I'd sworn in church. "Careful," she hissed, eyes wide, then softened when she saw my face. "Sorry. Just careful with those. I didn't break anything." I whispered back, rubbing my palms on my trousers. The cardboard edges had left little red marks on my hands. Mrs. Lorne leaned over the box, counting fast with her lips moving. "We're short again," she muttered. "Of course we are." I stood there waiting for another job, trying to look useful. I was the sort of kid they liked for little church tasks. Quiet, obedient, the kind who didn't ask for much. Mum said volunteering would build character. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew it got me out of the house and gave me something to do that adults thanked me for. Mrs. Lorne tapped the side of the box. "Take these to the candle stand," she said. "And don't light anything. Just replace the stubs." "I know," I said quickly. She pointed at me with 2 fingers like a warning. "I mean it. No flames today," Father Mark said. That made my stomach tighten a little, because it was an odd thing to say twice. I carried the box down the side aisle, arms straining. The candle stand sat near the little stone alcove where people knelt and whispered prayers they didn't want anyone to hear. There was a metal tray filled with sand and dozens of small candles stuck in at uneven angles, some burnt down to nubs, some barely touched. I knelt and started pulling the dead ones out, one by one, placing them into a tin. Wax stuck to my fingertips. It smelled faintly sweet and dusty, like old honey. I was focused on the job when I noticed the candle on the far left. It wasn't lit. None of them were. Mrs. Lorne made sure of that. The matches were kept behind the vestry door, and she watched them like they were gold. But this candle was melting. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks. The top had a rounded dip, like it had been burning, and the sides glistened. Then a bead of wax slid down the front, slowly, like a tear. I froze with a stub in my hand. My brain tried to explain it. Maybe someone had lit it earlier and snuffed it. Maybe it was still warm. But there was no smoke, no smell of a recently blown out candle. And the wax wasn't soft in that slow, cooling way. It was running. Steady. Too fast. I reached out, then stopped. I didn't want to touch it. It felt rude. like touching someone's face while they cried. Another bead of wax rolled down. Then another. The candle seemed to sag, losing its shape right in front of me. My throat tightened. "Mrs. Lorne," I called, trying to sound normal. "What?" Her voice came sharp from the other end of the church. I swallowed. "This candle's doing something." I heard her steps immediately, fast across the stone floor. She came into view, her apron swinging, and crouched beside me. Her eyes went straight to the candle. The color drained from her face so quickly it made me dizzy to watch. "Oh no," she whispered. The candle was melting faster now. Wax pooled at its base and spread into the sand like it was trying to crawl away. The top collapsed inward, as if something unseen was pressing down. I stared, unable to blink. "Why is it melting?" I asked. Mrs. Lorne didn't answer. Her hands hovered over it, trembling. She looked around sharply, scanning the empty pews, the closed doors, like she expected someone to be watching. "It's not lit." I whispered again, more to myself than her. "I know," she said through her teeth. The candle gave a soft crack. Not a flame crack. A wax crack, like ice under pressure. A new line split down the side, and another thick stream of wax poured out. I scooted back instinctively, my knees sliding on the stone. The heat wasn't real, but the sight of it made my body react like it was. Mrs. Lorne grabbed my wrist. Her grip was strong. "Go to the vestry," she said. "Get Father Mark." My mouth went dry. He said no flames. "Just go," she snapped, then softened when she saw how scared I looked. "Please." I ran. My shoes slapped too loudly for church, and I expected someone to tell me off. But nobody did. The church felt bigger when you were moving fast, like the air stretched between the pillars. I pushed into the vestry without knocking. Father Mark was standing at the sink washing his hands, slow and careful like he was preparing for something. He looked up, and his eyes flicked instantly to my face. "What is it?" he asked. "The candles," I blurted. "One of them is melting. It's not even lit." He didn't look surprised. That's what scared me the most. He didn't say, "What?" or "Don't be silly." He just shut off the tap and dried his hands slowly, like he'd been waiting for the moment. "Which one?" he asked. "The one on the left," I said. "It's crying wax." He shut his eyes for half a second. Then he opened them and nodded. "Stay here," he said. "I can't," I said, voice cracking. Mrs. Lorne said. Father Mark lifted one hand firm. "Stay here." His tone made my chest tighten. Not angry, just final, like an instruction meant to keep me alive. He left without another word. I stood frozen, hands shaking. I could hear my own breathing loud in the small room. I wanted to disobey. I wanted to run back and see what was happening, because the not knowing was making my stomach twist. I waited 10 seconds. Then I crept to the vestry door and cracked it open. I could see the candle stand from the angle if I leaned my head out slightly. Father Mark was there now, standing beside Mrs. Lorne. He wasn't rushing. He was watching the candle like you watch an injured animal. The candle had changed shape completely. The top had sunk, and the wax was no longer running in random drips. It was flowing in lines, thick and deliberate, down one side. A lump had formed near the base, rising out of the sand. It looked like something pushing up from underneath. Mrs. Lorne was whispering something I couldn't hear, lips moving fast. Father Mark held his hands together at his waist, knuckles white. Then the wax lump shifted. I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't my imagination. It moved, slowly, like it was being pulled upward by a hidden string. The lump stretched into a shape that made my skin crawl. 5 blunt points formed at the top, like fingers. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stop myself from making a noise. The wax hand rose higher, dripping and soft, and pressed upward into the air like it was reaching for help. It wasn't waving. It wasn't dramatic. It was just there. A hand made of candle wax, trembling slightly as it held itself up. Father Mark spoke then louder, and I heard him clearly. "Enough," he said. The hand paused. Then it curled, slowly, as if it was gripping something invisible. Mrs. Lorne let out a small sound, like a whimper, and took a step back. Father Mark stepped forward. He didn't touch the wax. He leaned down close, like he was speaking to someone lying on the ground. "You're not welcome," he said, voice steady. "You've been told." The wax hand twitched. And then, right beside it, another candle started melting. Then another, not lit, not warm, just collapsing, pouring wax like tears. The whole candle stand began to sag and shimmer with movement. I felt dizzy. My vision tunneled. My brain screamed at me to shut the door and obey, but my feet wouldn't move. Father Mark turned his head slightly, not looking toward the vestry, but speaking as if he knew I was there. "Close the door," he said quietly. I did it instantly, slamming it harder than I meant to, then pressing my back to it with my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to breathe. On the other side of the door, the church was still silent. No shouting, no crash, no drama, just silence. And then, faintly, the sound of something wet sliding, like wax moving where it shouldn't. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like hours. It was probably minutes. Then I heard Father Mark's footsteps again, slow and controlled, returning down the aisle. The vestry door handle turned. He stepped inside and closed it behind him, and when he turned to look at me, his face was pale. Mrs. Lorne followed him in, eyes red like she'd been crying but trying to hide it. I swallowed hard. "What was that?" I whispered. Father Mark didn't answer right away. He went to a drawer and took out a small metal tin. He opened it and pulled out a bundle of cloth and something else I didn't recognize at first, a thin strip of wax paper. He held it carefully, like evidence. "Do you know what used to be under that candle stand?" he asked me. I shook my head, throat too tight to speak properly. "Nampu," Mrs. Lorne answered instead, voice trembling. "A burial place," she whispered, "for the ones who weren't allowed." My skin prickled. Not allowed where? A Father Mark looked at me, and his eyes were tired in a way I didn't think adults could be. "Not allowed in the graveyard," he said softly. "Not allowed in the ground with everyone else. Not allowed to be remembered kindly." I stared at him. The word, burial, made everything inside me tighten. I suddenly pictured the wax hand reaching up like it had been under dirt for years. "But this church is holy," I whispered. "Nothing bad is supposed to." "It isn't about holy," Father Mark said, sharp enough to cut. Then he lowered his voice again. "It's about what people did and what was buried with it." Mrs. Lorne wiped her face with her apron. "It started years ago," she said, voice cracking. "Just one candle melting. Then it stopped. Then it came back. I couldn't stop shaking. Why now? Father Mark looked down at the wax paper strip in his hand. There was writing on it, smudged but readable in parts. A name, a date, and a word I couldn't fully make out, except for the last letters. UNWORTHY. My stomach turned. That was on the underside of the candle tray, Father Mark said quietly. Someone wrote it there a long time ago, like a label. Mrs. Lorne whispered, like a curse. Father Mark closed the tin with a soft click. Like a boundary, he corrected. A cruel one. I stared at him. So what did you do out there? Father Mark's jaw clenched. I removed the tray, he said. I took the candles off. I stopped feeding it. My mouth went dry. Feeding it. Mrs. Lorne made a small, broken sound. We didn't know, she whispered. We thought they were just candles. Father Mark leaned closer to me. Listen, he said. You did the right thing getting me. But you must not tell other children. Do you understand me? My heart hammered. Why? Because they'll come looking, he said. They'll treat it like a story. They'll dare each other. And it will respond. I nodded quickly, tears sliding down my face without permission. I won't, I whispered. That night, Father Mark and Mrs. Lorne stayed late. My mum was angry when I got home, thinking I'd been playing around, but I didn't argue. I couldn't. I just sat at the table and stared at my hands like they didn't belong to me. The next day, the candle stand was gone. In its place was a plain wooden table with a small bowl for coins and a sign that said PLASUCEELSE CANDAS ONLY. No explanation, no mention. People complained. Old ladies tutted. Someone joked about fire hazards. I never laughed. A week later, I asked Mrs. Lorne if the melting stopped. She looked at me carefully and nodded once. Yes, she said, for now. And the hand, I whispered. Her eyes went glossy again. It went down, she said softly. When the tray was lifted, it sank back into itself. I swallowed. So it's still there. Mrs. E. Lorne didn't deny it. She just said, some things don't leave. They just get quieter. Years later, when I was grown, I found out what Father Mark did after he removed the tray. He didn't throw it away. He didn't hide it. He didn't pretend nothing happened. He took the church records that named the unworthy dead, and he wrote their names properly into the memorial book like they mattered. He held a private service with nobody watching, no choir, no announcements. Just him speaking names into the air that had never been allowed to hold them. And the last thing he did, this is the part Mrs. Lorne told me in a whisper years afterward, was bury the wax tray in the churchyard like it was a body, deep enough that nobody would ever accidentally uncover it again. I don't know if that was a holy act or just a practical one. But I do know this. The candle didn't melt because of heat. It melted because something underneath wanted to be seen. And for the first time in a long time, someone finally looked at it and didn't call it unworthy. They called it a name.